You're exhausted, you're broke, and your garden still looks like a battlefield. But here's what might shock you. Indigenous growers fed entire communities for centuries without buying a single product, without fighting nature every day, without turning food production into a second job. They used 6 observation-based systems that made gardens self-regulating. If you're tired of losing weekends to maintenance and watching your money disappear at garden centers, hit subscribe. I'm breaking down the 6-system method that replaces grocery stores with backyard abundance. Most people think gardening harder equals better results. You're putting in more hours, you're buying more products, you're following more expert advice. And eventually, somehow, your garden becomes productive and low maintenance. But here's the reality. You're trapped in an intervention addiction that modern agriculture designed specifically to keep you dependent. Think about your current setup. You're watering every single day because your soil can't hold moisture. You're buying fertilizer every season because your soil can't generate nutrients. You're fighting pests with sprays that kill beneficial insects along with the problems. You're weeding constantly because bare soil invites colonization. You're spending entire weekends maintaining a system that's designed to fail without constant inputs. This isn't your fault. This is monoculture, the industrial model that got scaled down and marketed to home gardeners as the right way to grow. But here's what garden centers will never tell you. Monoculture creates dependency by design. When you plant single crops in rows with bare soil between them, you're building a battlefield, not an ecosystem. You're forcing plants to compete with weeds instead of cooperating with companions. You're eliminating the beneficial insects that regulate pests naturally. You're exposing soil to sun and rain, destroying the biology that builds fertility. Every problem you're fighting is a symptom of broken design, not insufficient effort. Meanwhile, indigenous growers across every continent figured out something completely different centuries ago. They observed how forests work, how plants grow in layers, how some species fix nitrogen while others mine minerals, how diversity creates stability instead of chaos. And they translated those observations into food systems that didn't require constant intervention. The 3 Sisters method is the perfect teaching example here. Corn provides vertical structure. Beans climb the corn and fix nitrogen at root level, feeding the corn and squash simultaneously. Squash spreads horizontally, shading out weeds with massive leaves and creating living mulch that holds moisture and moderates soil temperature. That's 3 crops in the same space, each making the others more productive, with 0 fertilizer, 0 pesticides, 0 daily watering, 0 weeding. The system regulates itself because relationships between plants create stability. Think about it. Your garden is a war zone where you're fighting on 5 fronts every week. Their gardens were ecosystems where plants, soil, water, and insects worked in coordinated relationships. Same space, same sunlight, completely different design philosophy. And the results speak for themselves. Those systems fed entire communities for generations without depleting soil, without creating pest explosions, without requiring purchased inputs that didn't exist yet. But here's where most people get confused. They think polyculture sounds complicated, like you need to memorize endless combinations and become some ecological expert. The reality is simpler than your current approach. Instead of fighting individual problems as they emerge, you design relationships that prevent problems from appearing in the first place. So what are the 6 systems that automate this? Here's the framework that replaces weekend labor with observation-based design. System 1 is companion planting, strategic use of plant relationships to create benefits instead of competition. You already saw this with 3 Sisters. But here's what most people miss. It goes deeper. Some plants fix atmospheric nitrogen and deposit it where neighbors can access it. Some have deep taproots that mine minerals from subsoil and bring them to the surface when leaves decompose. Some emit scents that confuse pest insects or attract beneficial predators. Some provide physical structure, trellises, windbreaks, shade, that other plants need to thrive. When you understand these functions, you stop thinking about individual plants. You start thinking about guilds, which is just groups of plants that work together better than they work alone. Now here's where it gets interesting. System 2 is soil building, but not the way you've been taught. You're not hauling compost from a pile in the yard corner. You're not buying amendment bags from garden centers. You're designing your planting system so fertility builds automatically as a byproduct of growth. Some plants in your guild are nitrogen fixers, legumes, clover, vetch. When you chop them mid-season before they seed, all that captured nitrogen deposits exactly where heavy feeders need it. Other plants are dynamic accumulators with deep roots. When their leaves fall or you chop them as mulch, they're returning minerals to the surface. The entire system becomes a fertility generator instead of a fertility consumer. Your soil gets richer every season instead of more depleted. And you're not doing anything except observing which plants build soil and including them in your design. System 3 addresses the water problem stealing your evenings. You're watering daily because your design bleeds moisture. Bare soil evaporates water straight into atmosphere. Compacted soil sheds rain instead of absorbing it. Shallow-rooted plants in loose soil need constant moisture because they can't access deep reserves. But here's the secret. When you design for passive water capture and retention, everything changes. You're creating swales and berms that slow water and force infiltration instead of runoff. You're mulching heavily with chop-and-drop material from nitrogen fixers, covering soil surface so it holds moisture like a sponge. You're establishing microclimates where taller plants shade shorter ones, reducing evaporation and creating cooler zones that retain water longer. And here's the shift that changes everything. You water deeply once or twice weekly instead of shallowly every day. Deep watering trains roots to grow down into subsoil where moisture reserves stay stable. Shallow daily watering trains roots to stay near the surface where they're vulnerable to every hot afternoon. When you combine passive water capture with deep-rooted polycultures and heavy mulching, you're creating a system that needs watering maybe twice weekly in summer, once weekly in spring and fall, almost never in winter. That's 1/7 the time you're spending now. Let me paint you a practical picture of how these 3 systems work together in a real bed. You've got 10 by 10 feet, 100 square feet. In the monoculture model, you'd plant tomatoes in rows with bare soil between them. Daily watering, monthly fertilizing, weekly pest spraying, constant weeding. But here's the companion approach that changes everything. You're planting tomatoes as your primary crop, but surrounding each plant with basil, which emits compounds that confuse tomato hornworms and improve tomato flavor. At each tomato base, you're planting marigolds, which repel aphids and whiteflies with scent. Between tomato rows, you're establishing white clover as living mulch. The clover fixes nitrogen, shades out weeds, and stays low enough that it doesn't compete for light. Around the perimeter, you're planting comfrey, a deep-rooted, dynamic accumulator. Every 6 weeks, you chop comfrey leaves and drop them as mulch around tomatoes. That's injecting minerals and organic matter exactly where you need it. Now think about the water dynamics in that bed. The clover mulch covers bare soil, so you're not losing moisture to evaporation. The comfrey mulch adds thick, organic layer that holds water like a sponge and slowly releases it as it decomposes. Tomato roots grow deep because you're watering once weekly with enough volume to penetrate 12 inches down. Basil and marigolds are shallow-rooted, using moisture from the top few inches that would evaporate anyway. You've created a layered system where every plant occupies a different niche and nothing gets wasted. And here's the payoff. You're watering that bed once weekly for 20 minutes. You're never fertilizing because clover and comfrey generate fertility automatically. You're not spraying anything because basil and marigolds handle pest confusion. You're not weeding because clover outcompetes opportunistic plants. Same 100 square feet. But you've reduced maintenance time by 80% and eliminated 100% of input costs. But here's what most people miss. These 3 systems work in year 1. You see results immediately. Companion relationships start functioning the day you plant them. Mulch starts holding moisture the first week. Nitrogen fixers start depositing fertility within the first month. You don't have to wait years for soil biology to mature or for perennials to establish. You're getting better yields with less work starting in the first season. Now let's talk about making this permanent, which is where Systems 4, 5, and 6 come in. System 4 is seed saving, and this is where you break the purchase cycle, keeping you dependent on garden centers. Here's the reality most gardeners don't understand. Modern hybrid seeds are designed to be replaced annually. They're bred for uniformity and short-term performance, but they don't breed true in the second generation. When you save seeds from hybrids, you get unpredictable results. Some plants revert to parent traits, some are sterile, some are weak. The seed companies know this. That's the business model. You buy seeds every spring because you can't save them effectively. But here's the secret they don't advertise. Open-pollinated varieties and heirlooms breed true. When you save seeds from open-pollinated tomatoes, those seeds produce plants identical to the parent. Same flavor, same disease resistance, same productivity. And here's where it gets interesting. After 2 or 3 generations in your specific garden, those saved seeds adapt to your soil conditions, your microclimate, your local pest pressures. You're not just saving money by eliminating seed purchases. You're creating varieties custom-tuned to your exact conditions, which means they perform better every year instead of staying static. The process is simple. You let your best plants go to seed at season's end. You harvest those seeds, dry them, store them in a cool, dark place, and plant them next spring. That's it. You're building a seed library that gets more valuable every year while everyone else stands in line at garden centers buying the same commercial varieties that aren't adapted to anything except industrial growing conditions. Think about the economics for a second. A packet of hybrid tomato seeds costs $5 and contains 25 seeds. You need to buy that packet every spring. Over 10 years, that's $50 per variety. But one open-pollinated tomato plant produces hundreds of seeds. You save those seeds once, and you have free seeds forever. Not just for yourself, you have enough to share with neighbors, trade with other gardeners, and build seed security in your community. The indigenous growers who developed 3 Sisters weren't buying corn seeds from centralized suppliers every year. They were saving the best ears from their best plants and replanting them. That's how those varieties became adapted to specific regions over centuries. You're doing the same thing on a backyard scale. System 5 is beneficial insect design, and this is where you stop fighting pests and start managing them through observation-based relationships. Here's what most people don't understand about garden pests. They're not the problem. The problem is you've eliminated every natural predator and created a monoculture buffet that concentrates pest populations. Think about it. When you spray pesticides, you're killing everything. The aphids, yes, but also the ladybugs that eat aphids, the lacewings that devour pest eggs, the parasitic wasps that lay eggs inside pest larvae. You're wiping out the entire food web and leaving a blank slate where pest populations explode because nothing regulates them anymore. But here's the secret. If you design habitat for beneficial insects, they show up and handle pest management for you automatically. The mechanics are simple. Beneficial insects need 3 things: food sources, water sources, and shelter. Food means nectar and pollen from flowering plants, which is why polycultures that include flowers aren't just decorative, they're functional pest control. Plant dill, fennel, yarrow, or alyssum in your beds, and you're providing food for predatory insects all season long. Water means shallow dishes with stones where insects can land and drink without drowning. Shelter means leaving some leaf litter, some dead plant stalks, some undisturbed soil where ground beetles and predatory wasps can overwinter. When you provide these 3 things, beneficial insect populations establish and maintain themselves. And here's where the polyculture approach pays off automatically. Diverse plantings confuse pest insects. A tomato hornworm trying to locate tomato plants by scent gets overwhelmed when tomatoes are surrounded by basil, marigolds, and clover. The olfactory signals are scrambled. Pest populations stay low because they can't efficiently locate host plants in diverse systems. You're not spraying anything, you're not buying anything, you're just designing relationships that prevent pest explosions before they happen. System 6 is seasonal succession, which is how you turn a garden that produces for 3 months into a food system that produces 52 weeks yearly. Most people plant in spring, harvest in summer, and then their garden sits empty for 6 months. But here's the reality. You can grow food year-round in almost every climate if you understand succession planting and seasonal rotations. Cool season crops, lettuce, kale, peas, broccoli, carrots, grow actively from fall through spring in most regions. Warm season crops, tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, grow from late spring through early fall. When you design for succession, you're planting cool season crops in late summer for fall and winter harvest. As those crops finish in spring, you're transplanting warm season starts into the same beds. You're never leaving soil bare. You're never losing production time. And here's where perennials become critical. They're producing every year without replanting. Asparagus in spring, berries in summer, tree fruits in fall. Perennial herbs year-round. When you combine annual succession with perennial anchors, you've built a system that delivers food continuously instead of seasonally. Now let's talk about scalability, because I know what you're thinking. This sounds great for someone with acreage, but I've got a small yard, containers, or HOA restrictions banning visible vegetable gardens. Here's the reality. These 6 systems work at any scale. You've got containers on a balcony? You can grow vertical 3 sisters setup in large containers. 1 corn stalk, 2 bean plants climbing it, compact squash at the base. You can establish polyculture herb containers with basil, parsley, and marigolds, producing year-round if you bring them inside during frost. You've got a small yard? You can run intensive 4x8 raised beds using all 6 systems: companions, soil-building cover crops, mulch for water retention, save seeds, beneficial insect flowers at edges, and seasonal succession, keeping beds productive 12 months. You've got HOA restrictions? Design ornamental, edible landscapes. Kale looks like decorative foliage. Rainbow chard is as colorful as any flower. Berry bushes are standard landscaping. Fruit trees with spring blossoms fit suburban aesthetics perfectly. You're growing food that's indistinguishable from ornamental landscaping to anyone who doesn't know what they're looking at. But here's the question everyone asks. Doesn't this take years to establish? And the honest answer is, some systems work immediately, some build over time. Companion planting works year 1. You plant the guild and you get benefits that season. Water capture works as soon as you mulch and establish swales. Beneficial insects show up within weeks if you plant flowers. But soil building takes 2 to 3 seasons to reach full effect. Seed adaptation happens over multiple generations. Perennials need a year or 2 to establish before heavy production. You're looking at a system that gives immediate results in some areas while building long-term capacity in others. And here's why that matters. You're still way ahead of the grocery store model from day 1. Let's address the real economics. The average family spends $600 monthly on groceries, and roughly $200 of that is produce. That's $2,400 yearly just on fruits and vegetables. The startup cost for a 6-system backyard microfarm that can replace most of that produce? Maybe $300. Seeds, compost for initial soil building, mulch material, a few perennial starts. You're breaking even in 2 months. After that, you're saving $2,000+ yearly while eating fresher, more nutritious food than anything available in stores. So here's where we land. You've got 6 systems working together to create self-regulating food production. You're using companion relationships to prevent pest problems and boost yields. You're building soil fertility automatically through nitrogen fixers and dynamic accumulators. You're capturing and retaining water passively, so you're watering once weekly instead of daily. You're saving seeds and adapting varieties to your conditions while eliminating seed costs. You're designing habitat for beneficial insects that manage pests for free. And you're planting in succession, so you're harvesting year-round instead of seasonally. That's the method. Nothing trendy, nothing requiring land you don't have, nothing demanding weekend labor. Just observation-based design that replaces grocery store spending with backyard abundance. Start with 2 systems. Master companion planting and water retention. Add soil building the 2nd season. Integrate the rest as you go. Your future self won't be spending Saturdays maintaining a war zone. You'll be harvesting from a system that works, while you live your actual life.